Camp Pros. This is Oliver Gregan. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the executive director at YMCA Camp Winona in DeLeon Springs, Florida.
And I'm Matt Hansberger. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the executive producer of podcasting at Go Camp Pro. And you are listening to First Class Counselors.
This is a series for camp directors to give to their counselors as they hire and prepare them for the upcoming summer.
Because as we've said for 3 long and awesome seasons now, that great camp directors know that counselors, you have the most important job at camp because you make or break a camper's week, and they'll come back to camp if you are a super awesome counselor. And that's what we want, kids coming back to camp. So thank you for listening and making yourself a better camp counselor.
Yep. So you've turned into first class counselors. Here we're going to cover one specific topic and cover the essentials as fast as we can.
It's the need to knows.
That can't go without
the fundamentals.
The basics.
Folks, thank you for tuning in for our season 3 wrap up of First Class Counselors. If you have found even one good thing in all of our 38-ish episodes, we would love it if you told a friend to listen to the show. That's the best way to help us boost our listeners and get these skills out to even more camp counselors. So please share this on your favorite podcast app, on Spotify, on Apple, on all of the podcasting places, or send them to our website, gocamp.pro/FCC, where you can see all of our show notes. Please share. But let's get into it today because it's a wrap on season 3 of First Class Counselors. That's the crowd cheering in case you didn't understand my sound effects. But it's been a great season, with this being our 18th episode of the season and 38th episode overall. And what a season it has been. Oliver, we've covered everything from camp counselor financials to essential skills, of course, but also with some good old-fashioned camp games between all of that. We've welcomed seasoned camp pros and guests, and even had our first ever collaboration with another podcast. Listen to that one with Substantiate. That was good times. So as we wrap up this season, we are going to talk about some of our favorite episodes and talk about some of the major takeaways from those and how they'll apply to this coming summer, the summer of 2021. Still in COVID, a little bit, kind of, depending on where you are. These are going to be useful tips. I promise. We won't get into the COVID thing. You're probably sick of hearing about it, and Oliver and I are probably sick of talking about it. So let's get into our favorite episodes. It's not just a clip highlight show. It's going to be useful. So let's dig in and get started. Oliver, what was your first favorite show from this season?
Yeah, we talked about a little bit and a lot of it. So, we only have so many episodes we're going to cover again. So I picked some of my most favorites, mostly because I had a lot of fun doing this for a little bit of research beforehand, so I could waste some time and not do actual work. Demystifying Camp. We had talked a little bit about how so much of camp by the media is just kind of misconstrued, like misunderstood child of the world. And that some of the things you may see in the movies and media is not exactly what's going to happen at camp, and about how us as camp directors typically will watch these movies and go, wait, hold on, where's the supervision? Wait, what? And a friend of mine recently brought up that there's a scene in The Parent Trap where they get put in the isolation cabin, and like I had blocked it out of my mind because of how scary as a camp director the idea of just taking 2 campers that aren't getting along and saying, oh yeah, you're just going to sit in this random cabin on the other side of camp where no one ever goes until you work your problems out. Blew my mind. Like it scares me. But yeah, so we talked a lot about that demystifying camp, and I think it's become a more important topic as we're getting closer to the summer, which is weirdly wonderful. You see, because this year, if you are a camp professional who has been sitting on Summer Camp Professionals Facebook group, you've probably seen about the, 1,000th post about staffing. Where are people getting staffing? How are they getting them? What are they doing to convince others? And what is coming out of it is really, I think, a summer where a lot of camps will be having their staff team made up of, a few tried and true counselors who come back to camp summer after summer, but a lot of the staff they may depend on who are coming back for 1 summer or maybe 2 summers have kind of faded out because of COVID. So staff teams this year are going to be made up of the hardcore staffers who know their stuff and know camp traditions, and the reasonably new people who grew up watching the Isolation Cabin, right? And
Right.
and when we had talked about this, we had kind of been hinting at this idea, and now that we are, I mean, for myself, I'm 2 weeks away from staff training when we're recording this, so I'll be jumping into that pool pretty soon, and I think I only have, out of typically 30 staff members, about 4 or 5 true returners. And then maybe a few counselors from summers past who are coming in. The majority of my staff team is going to be brand new going into this year and never worked as really staff counselors as summer camp counselors before. And that demystifying camp and getting them on board with some of the things that we do here at camp is going to be difficult, especially I think in today's day and age where, you know, the demands of the summer camp counselor schedule and way of life are very different than, you know, that 9 to 5 job that they may have been thinking about, or that kind of personal freedom that they may get in their typical summers that they've had before. So there's going to be this learning curve, and I don't know if camp professionals are going to be leaning on this tried and true love and dedication to camp. And if you're like a new counselor who's listening to this, or an existing counselor who's coming back, I think it's going to be important for us to understand, you know, this kind of gap in camp culture that might be a learning curve going into summer. So I just think it's such a cool episode that has now had a lot of influence on what we're going to be doing this summer. And I think going back and getting it a listen and seeing how maybe we were grazing over what was going to become a bigger deal back then that now is a big deal. So go back, listen to that episode, and see where Matt and I were maybe right or wrong, or starting to get on the trail for maybe some cool things. It's pretty cool to listen to. That's one of those ones where, like, 2020, like 2020 foresight, like you can always see things before. Like you look back and your vision is perfect. I don't know. It's late and we're 2 weeks away from summer. I'm going crazy. But that's,
Yes.
Go ahead, Matt.
I get it. I feel for you, buddy. 2020 hindsight maybe is what you were going for, but that's okay. That's okay. I got your back. That's why we're a team. I think that demystifying camp one was really good because it's also the impression that first time families are coming into camp with, and that's something that whether it's this summer or any summer, having the perspective of a new parent who doesn't necessarily know what their kids are in for, and maybe they've only seen those older movies like Meatballs or The Parent Trap, or all of those ones where the safety lines are questionable at best. That's what they think summer camp might be, and they're entrusting their kids to these like 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old people, and that's kind of scary for them. So remembering that perspective, I think, is something that we should always keep in the back of our mind. And Oliver, my first episode that I highlighted here really addresses that same issue, that there's a lot of new people coming into the camp world, which actually it's not an issue. I shouldn't call it an issue because it's great. We have so many people joining camp this year that have never done it before. And that means that it's the obligation of people that have been there before to make it as great as possible for those first-time staff members. So the episode called Supporting New Staff Members is a critical one for this summer, because if you're coming back to camp, you know the way, and yeah, camp's going to be different with COVID. There's going to be different things going on, but this is an opportunity to support those new staff members. And one of the takeaways from that episode that I think can apply is just having your head on a swivel for those new staff members. Maybe you can get together with some of the returners and you can each pick 1 or 2 new staff members to kind of just look over. And it's not, you don't need to hover over them, and they shouldn't even know that you're supporting them directly, but if you always make sure that they have a place to eat, that they always are in the know about any insider camp lingo or words that have been thrown around, that they get their camp name, that they know where to go during a break, that they have people to hang out with, that they can make friends. We want to bring them in because that's going to help overall with staffing in the future. And it's also just going to make sure it's a great environment for them. If you can think back to your first time on staff when you were a newbie, I bet you can remember some of the times that it was a little intimidating or nerve-wracking. So channel that inner feeling that you used to have and do all of the things that you can to support them in this coming year. And if you need more ideas, check out that episode, supporting new staff members.
Yeah, and I love that episode, and it reminds me of something that Matt and I have talked about long ago, and we kind of got out of the habit of it. But we always have so much to say during an episode, and sometimes we just forget about some key elements. And then one thing that I look back at that episode, we talk about it a little bit, but you being a new staff member, right? You might be listening to this podcast because you are a new staff member, and I think it's important. We have a little time here to add to it, and add to that topic. And I want to make sure you know to advocate for yourself. Camp is such a welcoming community, but the culture is intimidating, right? Like you walk into this existing place that has new words, new sounds, new places, new operations. Sometimes it's weird. Like, don't be scared to ask questions, right? Like you may get a giggle out of a staff member when you ask what something is or where to go or something during staff training or even near the end of the summer. But it's better to ask than to kind of walk around kind of dumbfounded or to go off and do the wrong thing. And I know that one of the key things too that Matt and I had talked about is support new staff members, not just during staff training, but all the way through summer, right?
Yeah.
You truly don't know how to navigate summer until you get to the very last day, send that last camper home, and then go, what did I just do? Right? Like you have like for you as maybe a counselor who's done it before, you can connect to this feeling of, maybe 2 weeks after camp, you just start to actually realize like what you just went through. So if you're a new counselor who's coming in this summer, take the opportunity to ask those questions and, don't just accept that you're going to make mistakes until the end of the summer. Advocate for yourself and find a way to not make those mistakes. And don't be scared to try and to admit to them and to continue working on your self-improvement throughout the summer, because you don't know what you're doing until you've got through a full summer. And to be honest, people who have gone through 10, 15, 100 summers, right? If you've gone through 100 summers, give me a call because, oh my God. But every summer presents something new, and your first summer presents the most. I'm a huge advocate that camp is a place for firsts. And firsts are the most memory setting things in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can remember a lot of seconds, you can remember a lot of thirds, but you don't remember a lot of 15ths, but you almost always remember firsts, whether it's the first time you were on the zip line, the first time you shot an arrow at archery, the first time you had a meal at camp, the first time that somebody, I don't know, picked a booger, flicked it, and it accidentally went into your face. These are things you remember as firsts. So don't be scared to admit that some firsts just take time, right? Some firsts come in week 9. So don't be scared to ask.
Sure.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to take the next topic first?
Sure can. Yeah, absolutely. This one is one that near and dear to my heart. I always found that some of the best counselors, working with kids is the most important thing we do. 100%. You got to have great camper relational skills to make sure that you're with them, and making those connections are really important. But one of the biggest unsung skills of a camp counselor is how good of a programmer they are. And by programmer, I basically mean, can you do cool stuff with kids? And we did a whole episode, and I think I literally called it "This Will Make You a Better Camp Programmer," because this summer with COVID, at least in Canada, and I know that in some places, counselors, there's not going to be as many program staff because cohorts aren't going to be mixing as much. So camp counselors are going to have to be more creative with their programming. So we did an episode about how to intentionally fill 5 minutes and gave lots of games in there. Shout out to that one. But in this episode about being a better camp programmer, we kind of got into program design and how to really intentionally set up your programs to be successful and be engaging. We talked a lot about intention and engaging. So some takeaways that I think you should implement this summer are engaging every camper is the goal of your session. And what is every camper doing? And are there options for them to get involved in some ways? So we said that, even if you're at the ropes course and a kid doesn't want to get involved, well, maybe they can put on a harness. And that's a great first step for them. Or maybe they can coil the rope and make sure no one's stepping on the rope. Or maybe they can help people do helmet checks. Obviously, you're going to check them again as a staff member, but there's different ways for them to get involved. One of my favorites on the ropes course, I'll just mention this quickly, is if you can get people to set up puzzle pieces all along the climbing wall or on the different elements, and people, whilst they're climbing, they can grab a couple puzzle pieces and throw them down to the ground. And a camper who maybe doesn't want to be on the ropes course can assemble the puzzle, and maybe it spells out a secret word or something like that. But that's the perfect example of a program modification that you or a programmer can do to help kids feel involved. So whether it's all about finding a way for them to participate. So whether it's helping you, helping each other, watching the time, collecting nature nuggets around, demonstrating their skills, showing off what they know, being curious and encouraging them and asking questions, that is a great way to keep them engaged and involved. And make sure you consider all of the kids in your cabin, because not everyone is always going to be into the game the entire time. So what are some ways we can keep them involved, or at least just like get them in for those first positive steps of being involved?
Yeah, I loved it. It's such an important thing to be a good camp programmer. And I think now that we're moving into the summer, and we had talked a little bit about staffing, and your camp might be in a situation where you're a little bit shorthanded, right? If you may not have it, like that program staff member who's there and ready. So, A, be ready to learn a new skill this summer, right? Like you might need to, if you're not an artist, you might need to learn to do a couple crafts that you can pull out in arts and crafts and get away with an hour with your kids, in arts and crafts,
Yep.
whatever it might be. Like if it's, learning how to make a color wheel with them, or maybe it's a little bit of origami, like you might have to leave your comfort zone to be able to have a decent program for your campers. And the other thing is to simplify, 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 simplify. Do not try to think of this overly confusing, adept program. Granted, if you have the time and the effort and the ability to do so, it makes the world of difference for your campers. But also, you know what? Staring at a worm and seeing how it moves, and maybe just like drawing a little grid on the ground and having your kids try to figure out where it's going to squirm to in the grid that you drew first, that's a great program. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of it now. Like, it's just fun, right?
Dude, I would go to worm races every day.
Done. Worm race. But yeah, don't overcomplicate yourself this summer. Kids have been stuck inside, and I don't want to say like your program is going to be less. No, just like this is the hard part, is even our generation grew up partially indoors and has started forgetting a little bit how to play. And I'm getting on the older side. There may be a 3 in the wrong decimal place coming for me soon.
Hey, careful.
But
Watch yourself.
I know. But I know that there are people who are my age who maybe didn't get as much time outside, maybe didn't get to do worm races, or to get those little spinny things off of a tree that do the helicopter down. I'm sorry, people.
Maple
Summer camp
Keys?
is right around the
Maple
corner.
Keys?
I will
Yeah.
Maple Keys. I will get a good night's sleep before summer camp. I will be fresh and ready.
That's a good tip. That's a pro tip right there as well.
Exactly. But some kids just haven't enjoyed those things. And if they have, they maybe haven't done it in a while. So take the time to do a helicopter race from the tallest stair that you can with a maple key. Take the time to put it on your nose and run around camp with them looking really funky, right? Simplify, simplify, simplify. Don't overcomplicate it, right? I once had a counselor who, I remember it was just so weird and I didn't understand it. It was out of my like realm of expertise as far as like, because I'm an overthinker. But he did a game where they just picked a large rock and they all spread around it and they threw a rock at the rock, and it was called rock, and it was simple and beautiful. Simplify your thought process on what you're going to do this summer. Make sure it's safe. Make sure it's fun. Just simplify it. Don't overcomplicate it. But I want to talk about a show that was honestly one of my favorites from the season. Um, I I loved it. I love having guests on the show. Guests are great. Because I love listening to other people, but also B, they're smarter than me, right? If we can get a guest on the show, it means that I can fill the room or the Zoom room with people who are just more intelligent. I can learn and grow. And we got to learn and grow from two of the best because not only are they amazing people who are part of the Go Camp Pro community, but they're also just two fantastically wonderful people nonetheless. And like literally, I remember when the show started and they got onto the Zoom call, like the smile on my face that they like put there just from like
Yeah,
when I entered the room.
I remember
So
that
this,
too. Yeah, that was
yeah, these
joyful.
two, yeah, these two people are Ruby and Rachel, and they are on the other podcasts for Go Camp Pro. So please check out their shows. But the topic we were talking about was really important because Matt and I are, two guys. We may not have the best insight in what it's like to be women, but we do have a good idea of how to start trying to be an ally because of the wonderful lessons that Ruby and Rachel gave us. So some of the things that I learned in that episode and I grew from was I already knew to listen, but now it just was emphasized to this point where I know that I need to listen. And even if I think I'm listening, I just need to listen more. I need to keep my ears open, but also my eyes, right? To make sure that I can see that I need to advocate as well. And I think that was really important. And I've been like the really cool thing about this is I know that I've been putting some of the things that we were taught into practice. So some of the things that we were taught was I remember Rachel saying, nothing about us without us, and just making sure that, you know, it's it's the case for, speak to the party that is being inconvenienced. Don't just speak for them because you think you know what's going on, right? And yes, this applies to this case of being an ally for women, but also think about how it's for everything, right? Like across the board. So just that simple concept of nothing about us without us. Matt, you had brought up a great point called actor versus ally, which we all kind of knew a little bit about, but it's great to just have a conversation with them about, don't just fake kind of being somebody who's advocating, but really truly be an ally. We talked obviously about being an ally. I remember giving the point of, it's a step process, right? Get understanding, advocate, educate yourself, and take action, right? And something that really touched me when we were kind of, I think, in the middle or starting to wrap up the show a little bit is we got onto this topic of what an ally has done for you and how that impacted Rachel and Ruby, and just some of the experiences that they've had where they can see and remember parts of their life where somebody advocated for them or was an ally to them and how it stands out. And we had talked about like being a superhero, right? Like getting to step up and be that person, but also being humble enough to say like, hey, I'm being an ally for someone who I think is capable. So, let's do it. So, yeah.
I loved that. I guests do make our podcast even better. Every time we've had a guest, it's been great. The one thing that that episode makes me think about is just some of the learning that I've done in this past year is that part of being equitably minded in your daily life is to look around at who isn't included. And being two white cisgendered males, our camp experience has been shaped by our gender and has been shaped by who we are and the privileges that we have. So the learning and this episode has both taught me to look around camp and see who is always being asked to do the same task, or see where the assumptions lie of who's going to do what or who's going to care for who, and look at where those inequities are, and then think about being an ally is think about what you can do to help with that. And often what we as straight cis white males can do is just step back, right? Just don't, you can raise your hand a little bit slower. You can give someone a little bit of a nudge to step up if they want, but creating space for more people to get to shine is some way that we can help. And Rachel and Ruby talked about that beautifully. So I definitely co-endorse that episode.
What's another episode that really stood out to you, Matt?
Yes, absolutely. So the next one was mistakes that make the head shake. I love this one. This is a recent one. We talked about eight or a bunch of different things that camp directors just kind of shake their heads at when camp counselors do. And briefly, um, I'll share my favorite part of this was that we kind of just talked about um, those things that build up that are just the unspoken assumptions that camp counselors make. And you mentioned this earlier, Oliver, that one of the biggest lessons that camp counselors can learn for this summer is to go to the people that can help solve your problems and to ask for help. We are all about supporting the growth of people as directors and the support of our staff members. You, as a counselor, look after the campers, and it's our job as directors to look after you and make sure that you're doing the best you can be. We don't see everything, so sometimes we need you to come tell us. But the worst thing that could happen is that at the end of the summer, we're doing your final summer evaluation, and you tell us that there was this thing going on all summer that we could have very easily fixed or helped you with, but that really like ruined your summer, especially if this is your first summer. Know that we want to make it the best it can be, but part of that comes from you looking to people that can help. A simple way to remember this is the phrase up, not out. If there's an issue that you're having, or there's something that could potentially turn into something gossipy, or you need help on something, it's often good to look up to a supervisor or to someone directly above you to get help with something like that. Good to ask your peers for some things, but if there's something you really need help with, go to somebody who can solve your problem. And that is usually your camp director.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you're making this great point, because if we're taking this time and we're missing the mistakes that, you know, are happening, then we're not going to be able to ever rectify them. And that was what I kind of loved the most about that episode, was when we're sitting there and we're talking about people not coming back to us, right? Which is exactly what you're just talking about, is we need to hear some of the things that are going wrong during the summer. So, and I also think that that episode was just one that made us happy to stand on our soapboxes and talk about some of the things that we just needed to vent about.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. For me, the next one I just wanted to make sure was, I thought our camper conversation episode was just so helpful. We've talked about kind of language of campers before, but this one just really stood out to me because um, it was about some of the things I just think are important. Like, just keep it simple. What's your tone like? What's your pace like? What's your body language? And I got to re-listen to this one because, you know, time is a beautiful thing that we only have so much about. So when I get to listen to episodes again and kind of hear Matt and I talk, I go and feel so. It's just really to fill my ego at one point, but also so that I could hear. And the one thing I loved about this episode is it was very cool to hear, at least myself, speaking with the different inflections in my voice throughout parts of the episode and going,
Mhm.
oh wow, like I can see how myself as a communicator, how when I'm working with kids, it translates into how I talk normally, but also giving the examples in the show so that I was communicating things effectively. It's just so interesting to me that the tone, the pace, even my body language in the video, you can see it changing. Like my back gets straight, my like chin goes up when I say certain things. Um, so
You're in the mode, the camp counselor mode.
yeah, you just get into it. And uh, there's just so many like little rules that we had spoken about in that episode that just highlighted this importance of when you speak properly, when you say the right things, when you keep speech appropriate, how you can really just use the language and the words that you have in your arsenal to help a camper develop and grow and listen to you and behave properly. So I thought it was just a useful episode. I think a lot of counselors should listen to it just so that they can gain some of those conversational skills.
That whole episode reminds me of the grand unifying theory that Travis presents, is that camp is all about IAAT. I am always teaching. And the language that we use and the way we speak to campers is the tone and of the culture that we set at camp. So when we use things like manners, when we say please and thank you, and when we normalize talking about how we're feeling, and when we speak with empathy and kindness and all of those things, we are teaching the lesson of that is a great way to communicate. And what a great lesson for our kids to learn this summer from us at camp, that kindness and feelings and please and thank yous, that is the cool thing to do. Because don't ever forget, we haven't said this yet in this episode, and we do in almost every other ones, that you are the rock stars of these kids' lives. And this summer, more than any other summer, these kids have been making connections virtually on screen, and they've been covered with masks, and they've only been hanging out with adults that kind of look like their parents or people in their family. You are going to be so cool to them this summer. So take that responsibility wisely and use that great power responsibly to help our kids be awesome people just by being a positive example.
Yeah.
So I can jump into my last one if you want here, Oliver. If you hadn't, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, go right ahead.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Yes. So last one here definitely shouldn't be forgotten, is because this is what camp is all about: wonder and magic. Camp, we talk about camp being this magical place, and I know that, it's not actually magic, but we get to create this other world for kids. And just like you being a rock star to them, they get to come to camp and have a truly extraordinary experience, especially from what they have been experiencing in this past year. And there were a lot of amazing ideas in that episode. I was looking at our show notes, Oliver, and we had topic one, which was like, what is magic, kind of the 101 on it, which was really great. And then topic two, we tried to do 10 tips each, and I'm pretty sure that episode was like an hour and a half long. Maybe listen to that one on like ×2 speed, so that it'll be like just one of the regular length ones. But the top takeaway from that one for me is that there are tons of things that we can do to create another world for campers to exist in, with costumes and storylines and themes and being silly and being goofy and funny campfire songs and skits. There's a million things that we can do, but to create a wondrous place for kids, the thing that we need to do is help them feel noticed. And that's it. Help them feel appreciated and cared for. And it's the simple things that will do that. It's like having a name tag on their door before they come to camp, so they know that this room is theirs and this bunk is theirs and they have a place. Knowing their name right off the bat and not ever forgetting it from step one. Learning about doing a secret handshake, even if it's COVID safe, with them. Making them feel special and noticed, and recognizing their strengths. One of the things that stood out one of the things that stood out to me the most when I was a camp counselor was we had a speaker come in and talk about how his daughter was affected by camp. And the way he described it, it's a little like morbid, which is why I remember it, I think. He said it's your job as camp counselors to reach inside of those campers and pull out the thing that you think is so cool about them and hold it up to their face. And you say, this is you, this is what I noticed, and you are awesome. And if we can do that with campers this summer, then it's going to make up for every online experience, for every time that their Zoom call got disconnected. It'll make up for every missed connection, literally and physically, that they missed over the last year. And it's an incredible responsibility to do something magical and awesome, but you could definitely do it.
Yeah, and I think too, like we've talked a little bit about it already in this episode about what those kids are like, and you're talking about it here. Those kids are coming out of a Zoom classroom to come out to camp, right? This is, for a lot of them, the first time that they're going to be able to like just not have to deal with the struggles of everything going on, right? Like, granted, there's still going to be practices and stuff in place. But man, can you imagine the feeling a child is going to have? Like, it's almost probably going to be uncomfortable to go through it, but
Yes.
like to finally get some freedom as a kid after everything, wow! Like that feeling has to be incredible. And if you are one of those counselors who's giving that magic and wonder while they're getting that freedom that they haven't felt in so long, and getting through that uncomfortableness of like, no, it's like okay, like things are going to be slightly more like what normal is going to be again,
Mm-hmm.
and that's so much in this next year. I'm going to take a quick second here and talk about another favorite episode of mine. I think it was our big sales pitch, but also just filled with vital information for staff. We talked first class financials. So what are the financial situations of you as a counselor, how to, like, legitimately, I think the first, 10 minutes of the show are me just talking about kind of the basics of financial information of being a counselor, like how much money you could be potentially making, how you get paid, different positions kind of at camp, like the basic, like 101 of camp financials. It's probably 5 minutes. Like, I get really excited to listen to it because I love camp and it's probably vital information, but it's probably to some people like 5 minutes of just complete, like, wow, the information overload. Like, let me get my notebook out. But it's 10 minutes. I think that's really valuable. And then also Matt and I talk about the values of camp across the board, like the extra benefits. And if you have a friend who might be like on the line about coming to working at camp, like, there's the sales pitch episode right there. Like, it's Matt and I talking about this wonder of camp, benefits of being a counselor. And I think this year, with so many camps desperate for staff, it was definitely an episode that's out there to kind of market the power of being a staff member on a logistics standpoint, right? Like Matt talked about the wonder and magic and the power that your position has as a counselor. But the first class financials episode really hits home with, what's in it for you as a counselor? What do you get out of this? It had some reminders to me of when we had Kim Aycock on our first season and we talked about camp being a real job. With a major difference of us actually talking about, the dollar bills of it all this time around, which I think was really important. So take the minute, go and listen to that so that you as a counselor this summer are well equipped for what the benefits of your job are going to be. And like, also know that this year is going to be different, right? Like, I think a lot of camps are starting to offer bonuses in order to find camp staff. And that does not mean your camp needs to offer you a bonus. Some camps are going to start doing some more staff appreciation because that's what they can afford to do. So they're going to do maybe a few more things to really show that they care about you. And I think camps are really learning how important their staff is this year, and that camp like the first class financials that staff have and list and know, like being a camp counselor, this is the year I think that a lot of it's getting thrown on its head, right? A lot of that information that I gave at the beginning of the episode is still holding true, but there is a change. And Matt and I talked in that episode about how camps are, we've always wanted to pay our staff more. We think it's necessary. We're trying to find a way to do it. And I think this year, because of COVID, the lower staff, is this the year kind of where camps are, it's make or break. Like, all right, I'm going to have to figure out how to pay the staff more money this year. I'm going to have to figure out how to make sure my staff is benefiting from the summer more. So I think you as a counselor, if you are short staffed, maybe your camp is maybe not high on the income bracket, you may not get the benefits of a higher salary or like more time off or anything like that. But I think after summer, and Andy actually talked about this in the episode that I wasn't here for, but I got to listen to, is you're going to be regarded as a hero to that camp. Like, you are going to be someone that, like Andy said it, he will go, like,
he will do
out
anything.
of his way.
He'll do anything for those staff members. Yeah.
For those staff members who made it through the last summer with him, going through a COVID summer, and you're going to be going through a summer this year where the same thing is happening for these directors out there, where we're short staffed, trying to find more, and then you're that staff member who's coming through and working that whole summer. Man, I know that feeling that Andy has, and just know, like, financially, whatever it might, whether it is monetary, whether it is through like beneficial payback, right, of advocation, you are going to have someone in your corner if you work this summer. And I think that's something that we talked about, Andy talked about, I'm going to talk about with my staff so heavily this year. We talked about it back long ago with Kim, but it's now way more in the forefront. So just know like the power you're going to have as a counselor through the magic Matt was talking about, but also through, this, this year, like you're a difference maker. So.
Well said, Oliver. I do think it is true and will be true for the next couple of summers that for sure, until we see a major change in the industry, that you, and this will be very true this summer, you will not be paid for all the work that you do this summer. You will not be monetarily compensated for all the work that you will do and for how hard you will work. I say this all the time, and I'll say it again, that camp is simultaneously the best and the hardest job in the entire world, especially being a camp counselor. You have so much love to give these kids, and they need it so desperately. And we could never pay you as much as you're worth in that way. But that being said, this is a job that will go on your resume, and no matter, I think what is also changing, we talked about in the episode with Kim in season 2, we said that people still don't really understand the summer camp world, and they don't get it, but now summer camp is in the news more than ever, right? In Ontario, at least right now, there is very much a will they won't they of whether camp is going to go, and camp associations across North America have done a really good job of telling the story to the greater population of why camp is important, and people understand it now even more, that camp is a place for in-person connection, and it's truly unique that way because there's no curriculum like it is at school. It's truly like a really unique community that kids can be a part of. So I think that when you put camp on your resume now, from now going forward, it will carry more weight than ever before, and especially more weight for going through a COVID summer and doing all the things that you're going to have to do to make this summer successful. So that is almost invaluable in terms of how it will set you up for jobs in the future. So camp counselor financials, will you get paid a lot this summer? Maybe not as much as you deserve, but it will pay in dividends. There's my financial word of the day. It will pay in dividends later.
Yeah, great word find there. I'm definitely struggling for words, but I'm happy that our dictionary is working for you.
I probably didn't even use it correctly. I don't know. Who knows?
But you know what? Sometimes it's just easier when you make up the words yourself. So it's Eggle time.
Yeah, nice.
So our Eggle is our ever-growing, ever-learning. It's a trick, a tip, a game, a song for counselors to use to be better every single day. Today, I want to teach a game that's a little bit about learning pronouns. Matt and I start every single episode saying ours to make it easier for people, and you can advocate for that, but sometimes people are a little bit uncomfortable with what their pronouns may be. Also, sometimes you might be leading a program or something like that, may not actually be sure what gender somebody is just based off of the look, but they may not, want to admit it, right? Or like have you mistakenly say what their gender is. And this is not just for trans, but if somebody maybe takes on some more generic looks of someone of the opposite of the other gender. So so what I like to do is this game, it's called third person meet and greet. And what I do is someone just says, you just have everyone introduce themselves in the third person. It's so simple. And this is how it goes. His name is Oliver. He enjoys ice cream. He thinks speaking in the third person makes him cool. And that confidence is cool, even if the practice is weird. So all it is you introduce the name of yourself in third person, something you enjoy doing, and really that's it. And they can kind of talk about themselves in the third person for a few sentences there, describe themselves. And what it does is it kind of makes them work into that third person where they can use their he, she, him, she, her, hers, or it, they, them into the conversation. So you can kind of figure out maybe how they identify. And it's a really nondescript way. And when you're doing this with kids, they may not even notice this is what they're doing, which is really great, because then all of a sudden everyone in the group is just accepted on what they declare themselves as right there. And then there's no questions about it. And it makes it just kind of go smoothly. And I like it because it allows just acceptance off the bat, right? And I think that's really important. And you also don't have to bring up the conversation all of the time, right? This is sometimes a very like talking about LGBTQ can sometimes get to a very deep conversation. It might get complicated, and that's not saying that you shouldn't have the conversation. It's definitely important, but this is a way that you can cover a very important issue without having to have an intense conversation about the subject. So it's something that I enjoy doing, and I think it's important.
Yeah, I like the idea for campers to be able to share the pronouns that they want to be in a low pressure way. Because I know that even sharing pronouns can be tough if somebody is not wanting to like out themselves in front of a group of people. And this is nice to kind of give them the option of doing that, or they can choose to introduce themselves in a different way if that's how they want to do it. So that's great. Thanks, Oliver. We, to give you a little behind the scenes look, Oliver and I were very on the fence about the topic of this episode. And because we wanted to do a wrap up, but we also wanted to give you some applicable skills. So we kind of found the best of both worlds. But as a preview, next season, we're going to dive into the world of team building and building bonds with cabins through intentional games and activities. And there's philosophy, there's practices. We could do a whole separate podcast about that. But I'll give you one of my favorite games that you can play this summer with your small little cohort of kids to help get to know their names and get them to work together. And you can do it right off the start. It's called Group Juggling by a guy named Jim Kane. And if you haven't read any of Jim Kane's books, I'll put his stuff in the show notes. You should definitely check him out. He's awesome, very nice person, and super smart when it comes to this stuff. So group juggling is when you stand in a circle facing inwards with everybody. You can keep each other 6 feet apart if that's what you have to do. And this game still works perfectly. What you do is you take an object, usually using like a soft throwable ball, even a tennis ball can work really well. And what you do is you look across the circle. First, I would go around, get everyone to share their names in case that needs to be remembered. Totally fine to do that. And then what you do is you say the person's name and then you throw the ball to them once you've looked at them. So I would say Oliver would catch the ball, and then I put my hand on my head as somebody who's got the ball already. Oliver then chooses somebody else and throws it to them, and Oliver puts his hand on his head. And then we go all around the circle so that everyone has only gotten the ball once before it comes back to me as the leader. And then we've established a pattern. And then the way the game works is that you continue that pattern and try to do different challenges with it. So you could speed it up, you could time keep and see if you can do it as fast as possible. You can try and do it with no drops to make sure that we're being efficient. Sometimes I like to create a little creature out of the ball, and I say that like Bob the ball really doesn't like touching the ground, so we want to keep Bob safe, and camp is safe, so building some safety metaphors in there. You can add 2 objects at once. You can get people to change neighborhoods or change who they're standing beside, so the pattern switches up. Adding a second object is super fun, and you can build up. You have to build up to this, but the ultimate level is two objects with 2 separate patterns, while people out loud are sharing their favorite food, and a tap on the back is being passed all the way around the circle. I've only seen it done once or twice where a group of like 10 people could get to that without dropping everything. And it was brilliant. It was very cool. So group juggling is a great addition to your program this summer. And that's my angle.
Yeah, I love group juggling. It's such a simple thing to do. And also, for those of you who may not want to disinfect the items that you are doing, you could do it with invisible items or sounds, is what I've done in the past. So as a COVID option for you who's trying to do something without any props, you can do this game by sending a snap. So if I was to snap at Matt, like I'm throwing a ball, and then Matt can catch it by snapping and catching it. So you can, if you were to be watching YouTube, you can see me right now kind of passing the ball between my 2 hands like I'm juggling, and then I could throw it to Matt and he would catch it by snapping. There we go. Matt's doing it pretty good. And then Matt can throw it back to the screen to me. So Matt, if you throw it like that, there we go. And then I just caught it all the way from Canada to Florida. We just started it. But you can pass that snap around the circle, but then you could also do a clap that you can send to somebody. You can do a stomp that you can send to somebody. You can let your group get creative, like maybe it's a slap on the butt or something like that, like it's a funny action. I've done it before where it's motions as well. So you say like, we have all these different balls from all these different sports. You can't see them, but we need to, use them so they feel appreciated. So, you might throw a baseball to somebody and that has one order around the circle. You might do a soccer ball that you kick and that goes in one way around the circle. You might have a tennis ball that you hit with a racket. And your group, you can kind of start to see who the I know.
It's intense.
And then you might get to see some of the extroverts. They get really embellished, like they start spiking the tennis ball. They might like shoot the soccer ball, and then if they have a baseball coming, they might do like that big catch over the fence. So you can have a lot of fun with Group Chuckle that way. It's such a great game, and you could do it COVID or non-COVID, touching or no touching. It's a great game.
Yep.
All right. But I mean, we had so many episodes this season, and obviously you and I are a plethora of information to pull camp info from. Matt, if I needed to pick your brain for a little bit, how can I get a hold of you?
Yes, you can email me anytime, matt@gocamp.pro. I am a freelancer this summer. I'm not working for a specific camp. So besides a couple of canoe trips and some time in nature, I will be available. If you need some help, need someone to chat with, need someone to vent to that doesn't work for your camp, or to offer some advice, email me anytime, Matt, MATT @gocamp.pro. How about you, Oliver?
So you can get a hold of me at oliver.gregan.scd@gmail.com. So you can also get a hold of me. But I will warn you, pretty much what you'll get is a camp director who will be the vice versa of Matt. So you can call me to hear me vent and feel better about your situation. You can, everything for summer is going to go really well because, like we always say at the end of all of our episodes, and we'll hold until we get there. But we're going to be good. So with that being said, all right, if you enjoyed today's episode, we would be so grateful if you left us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like and don't like about the show, but help boost our rankings and helps more people discover the show.
Also, just remember to please check out gocamp.pro/FCC for the show notes from this one. And you can visit gocamp.pro/podcast for all of the other podcasts that are going on in our 7 podcasts on the Go Camp Pro network. There are some really awesome pre-summer ones going on for camp directors of all ages and stages. So gocamp.pro/podcast is the best way to find those.
Yeah. And as much as I say I will be busy during summer, you can always reach out, contact, and because of what I say, it's thanks for listening, friends, and camp is camp, and camp's all good.